Jai Hind and welcome everyone to the fourth day of 10-day skill development program on food and beverage service. My name is Vinay. I am assistant professor with Bikaji Kama Subharti College of Hotel Management and I will be today's moderator for your session. Today's session will begin with online guest lecture, introduction to the whiskey, followed by the demonstration on the whiskey-based cocktails. Moving forward, for today's For today's topic, Introduction to Whiskey, we have eminent speaker, Mr. Mohit, is an energetic, adaptable F&B personal and wine enthusiastic with experience in luxury hotels and Michelin star F&B establishment. He is graduate from IHM Shimla. He is also certified with WSET Level 3 in Wines and Spirit from Wines and Spirit Education Trust. And attended various wine tours across New Zealand and India. He is an outstanding leader and exceptional interpersonal skills. His area of expertise are food and beverage service, wines, spirit, operation, financial management, distillation, employee relation. His vast experience and knowledge will definitely give us a better understanding about the basics of whiskey. We welcome on behalf of the Subharti College of Hotel Management. Thank you, sir. Now, without further ado, we will turn our speaker. Sir, I request you proceed with the topic.
And thank you for your warm welcome. And let's go ahead with introduce myself. My name is Mohit. I've been working with hotels across the world. I've worked in Maldives, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, China, and a few other places. I've worked with the Shangri-La Intercontinentals. With the slide. Today we are talking about whiskey. So let's start with the term beverage. What is beverage? This term relates to anything that is drinkable, liquid. In terms of alcoholic beverage, we'll call it ethanol, obtained by fermentation or distillation. Subdivisions of alcoholic beverages are as follows. Spirit, this term refers to fermented fruit or vegetables that contains no added sugar and it has at least 20% alcohol by volume. I hope I'll share my screen. All right. The next thing is the term called liquor. This term refers to a drinkable liquid containing ethanol that is produced by means of distilling fermented grain, fruits, or vegetables that contain added sugar and flavors. Next is wine. This term or sparkling containing ethanol, which is produced by the fermented grape juice. And then we have beer, of course, which is drinkable liquid containing ethanol produced by brewing fermentation of starches, mainly derived from cereal grains. Now, we're coming back to whiskey. So whiskey. Whiskey or whiskey refers to a broad category of alcoholic beverages that are distilled from fermented grain mash and are aged in wooden casks or oak barrels, how you say that. Different grains are used for different varieties of whiskeys, including barley, malted barley, rye, wheat, maize, corn. And for the spelling part, we will say the Scotch and Canadian whiskies are pronounced as whiskey, W-H-I-S-K-Y, and Irish and American whiskies are pronounced as whiskies, which is W-H-I-S-K-E-Y-S. All right, let's go ahead with the slideshow. Whiskey. So what is whiskey? Whiskey is a spirit made by grains are barley, maize, corn, wheat, rye. Could be anything. All right, spelling of whiskey, as I repeated, I will repeat myself again. By long-standing tradition, Scottish whiskey distillers spell the name of spirit as whiskey, W-H-I-S-K-Y. And Irish distillers spell their spirit as whiskey, W-H-I-S-K-E-Y. Canadians allow the Scottish spelling, like whiskey, W-H-I-S-K-Y, and the American follow the Irish spelling, which is W-H-I-S-K-E-Y. Grain is prominent and source of alcohol that originates in Ireland. That was between 10th and 15th century. Distillate, which is the byproduct of what we call is Peat, all right, pronounced as whiskey by means, which means water of life. By both Scotland and Ireland have long been claiming to be the original source of whiskey, but neutral heads say that the soldiers of Henry II had taken a lot of Peat to England after they invaded Ireland in the 12th century. This precedes the older known references to Scotch as an entry in the Scottish rules in 1484. So the first Irish people used whiskey, and then it went to Scotland and other parts of the world. So there are types of whiskey, which is Scotland. They made whiskey from barley, both malted and unmalted, and with a slight bit of corn. And Ireland, they make also barley, both malted and unmalted. USA is more on corn and rye, and Canadians are more on rye for grains. All right. In the production process, we will talk about materials, storing, malting, germination, kilning, sieving, grinding, distillation, maturing, and blending. These are the production processes that are involved in production of any whiskey around the world. All right. Now, number one, steeping. The grains are soaked in huge tanks of water. The grains I mentioned earlier, that is barley, wheat, it could be rye, it could be corn. All right. They are soaked in huge tanks of water at about 10 degrees for 2 to 3 days for steeping process. Some producers even change the water in between to provide a dry resting period, and the grain gets the air also. All right, you can easily filter the water, then you can add additional water just to get the. Next is malting. Grains are taken to malt room, which is very hard. Grains are spread to the depth of 15 to 30 centimeters to allow grain breathing while sprouting. All right, sprouting, everyone knows about sprouting. Grains are constantly stirred for uniform breathing and to prevent sprout getting entwined. All right. And this is the process that goes on for about 6 to 15 days at about 12 to 21 degrees Celsius. That is malting process number 2. All right. See in the window what a malting room looks like. All right, these are all grains. Next process is germination. During this process, the insoluble starch gets converted to maltose and dextrine and rootlets, also known as malts clumps that appears. All right, cystase convert the insoluble starch to soluble starch. And then we have diastase that converts the soluble starch to sugar. This is the process of germination. Grain is referred to as green. Now, this is what germinated bodies look like. They have sprouted process in process grain on in Scotch, the grains are roasted, thus adding peat aroma to Scotch. In case of Irish whiskey, grains are roasted with gas and ice. Of what is peat? It is a combination of decomposed soil and decompose the Hello?
Yeah, Mohit, you're online.
Sorry, something went wrong with the internet. And we are back online. So I was talking about peat. What is peat? And what are the uses of peat? So here we go. So small video I'm playing for you
So
guys.
most of us have tasted or drink whiskies like Ardbeg and Lafroig. We know that it tastes smoky, but have you ever wondered what actually is peat? Well, today on Let's Talk Drinks, I'm going to explain it. Welcome back, guys. So you're probably wondering, what is peat? Well, it's actually an accumulation of biomatters from a peat bog. What the hell's a peat bog then? It's a really old landscape that dates back thousands of years. You see, thousands of years ago, Scotland was covered in huge rivers of ice that were actually called glaciers, and they were formed from ice and snow, just compounding and accumulating on top of the mountains. About 11,500 years ago, Scotland became warmer, and a lot of that ice started to melt. It left behind a bleak landscape, but some areas were left with a fresh, fertile
Share video.
sediment. This had run down. So most of us have tasted or drink peated whiskies like Ardbeg and Lafroig. We know that it tastes smoky, but have you ever wondered what actually is peat? Well, today on Let's Talk Drinks, I'm going to explain it. Welcome back, guys. So you're probably wondering, what is peat? Well, it's actually an accumulation of biomatters from a peat bog. What the hell's a peat bog then? It's a really old landscape that dates back thousands of years. You see, thousands of years ago, Scotland was covered in huge rivers of ice that were actually called glaciers, and they were formed from ice and snow, just compounding and accumulating on top of the mountains. About 11,500 years ago, Scotland became warmer, and a lot of that ice started to melt. It left behind a bleak landscape, but some areas were left with a fresh, fertile sediment. This had run down from the mountains as the ice is melting. Over time, the winds blew plant seeds from southern Britain and all over Europe, and those plant seeds started growing in the sediment. The climate eventually became wetter, and this wasn't suitable for growing trees in these areas, but it was great for bog plants like cotton grass and sphagnum mosses. These areas were mainly waterlogged with acidic soil that had no nutrients. These bog plants are really tough, and when they die, they don't really break down, and they just keep accumulating. And this accumulation becomes the formation of peat. 1 millimetre of peat forms every year, and over the thousands of years, every time that those plants die, that peat continues to grow. And that's pretty much how peat bogs are formed. So what is peat? It's a mixture of soil and decomposed vegetable matter. It's been used in Scotland for heating, cooking, for centuries in all these areas where there's not a lot of wood to use. Peat's also a massive part of Scotch whisky production, as it's used to dry and flavour the barley and grains. However, not all peat tastes the same. Peat that is close to the sea normally has a salty, medicinal, briny iodine flavour, mainly as the vegetable matter is funguses, mosses, roots and grasses that are sprayed with salt water from the Arctic winds. Peat from the mainland of Scotland, especially the Caledonian forest, is a lot more smokier, barbecue, campfire type of taste. This is because it's mainly decomposed trees and more wood matter. Not only Scotland has peat, distilleries in Australia, Ireland, America and other countries are also making peated whiskies. So how do they collect the peat? They use a peat cutter, which they then scoop out and lay in the field for about 3 months. This allows it to dry, and then it's normally stored in the warehouses to be used the following year. How do they burn the peat? It's normally burnt in a peat kiln. However, distilleries and their peat different. For distilleries, fire is a pot, which is small, as they want to smoke the barley, they heat it. They like to do it in 2 stages, as some distilleries like to smoke and dry the barley at the same time. Malted barley obviously makes a big impact on the flavour or the ppm of the whiskey that it produces. ppm is the parts per million of fennel that's in the whiskey. Something like Ardmore Scotch whisky is lightly peated and has a ppm of about 12 to 13. Whiskies like Lafroig and Ardbeg have a ppm of about 40 to 50 and they're considered heavily peated. And then you have the real peat monsters like the Octomore or the Ardbeg Supernovas that can go anywhere from 100 ppm to 300. I hope that explains a little bit about peat for you, and keep a lookout for our upcoming videos on peated whiskies. Guys, if you've learned something, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you again soon on Let's Talk Drink.
All right, guys, so that was about peat or peated whiskies, which is very common in Scotland. Peat oil and vegetable remains from the past. They use it to smoke the whiskies, give it that smoky flavor. All right. This is what peat is. There is vegetable decomposed, then it's lignite, then it takes time, settles down, then you use it. Continued here, extraction of sugar. All right, what is extraction of sugar? This can be done by 2 methods, that is infusion. The process of infusion takes place in huge tanks called mash tun. The grist is introduced to mash tun along with water. The mixture is heated up to 63 degrees Celsius for 2 hours. Then the mechanical racks present inside the tank stir the mixture. The result in the formation of hot, sweet liquid called wort. Wort is filtered through finely slotted plate in the bottom of mash tun, also known as underback. The screen is visible. Vinay?
But
Screen is visible.
Just share.
Share the screen, right?
Share screen or share video file?
I can share PPT here.
Press share screen.
Just share the screen, right?
Yeah. So people can see your screen.
Yeah, just give me a minute. Can see now?
No. Share screen के बाद press on the block.
Just a moment.
Entire screen, then click on the box.
Hold on, yeah. Just a moment. I think my privacy settings are on. Privacy.
मोहित विंडोज में जा, ओ सॉरी शेयर पे जा, शेयर के नीचे शेयर स्क्रीन पे क्लिक कर, शेयर स्क्रीन के नीचे विंडोज पे जा, विंडोज के जो टैब आया ना टैब पे क्लिक कर.
Share screen. Okay, share. Sharing now?
Sir, click on share, then share screen. In the center, you can see the windows. Then click on StreamYard.
Moment. Just give me a minute, guys. Screen recording. Extraction of my bad. My screen is out. So, yeah, fermentation. Fermentation is a process which converts sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is stored in different tanks. This process takes about 7 to 14 days. This is the process of fermentation. Of course, you're not able to see because my screen is out. And distillation. Next process is called distillation. Pot still is also known as wash still. Head called as foreshot. Heart called as low wines because of the low alcoholic content, that is 40%. And then there is the third one, which is called a tail, as aftershot. Note the foreshot and aftershot are together as called as fiends. Next is second distillation, and you get three products, which is head, heart, and the tail. Heart is about and then Irish whiskey normally goes for a third time distillation, and distilled spirits come out at 85%. Maturation, distilled whiskey filled in oak casks under exercise supervision and stored in bonding warehouses, often underground, for at least 3 years in Scotland and 5 years in Ireland to mature. This is about maturation of whiskies in different countries. That is, Scotland is 3 years and 5 years in Ireland to mature. As the whiskey matures in casks, mellows the raw whiskey. Mellows means it really softens down the tannins and makes the whiskey much more smoother for consumption. Whiskies mature in casks for a period of 15 years and sometimes more. If the whiskey is left too long in the cask, it will start smelling like wood. It'll get more smoky, it'll smell like wood. The age which appear on the label indicates the youngest whiskey in the blend. All right, so let's say 12 years old, and we'll have 12 years old whiskey which is blended. Blending. It is done by experts, a panel of experts, of course. And the blending takes place in the blending ward or the room. mixes the whiskies thoroughly and finally pumped into oak casks where they remain for some more time to harmonize. Note, single malt whiskies are never blended. So this is a small note for you guys. Final stages. After blending and harmonizing the whiskey is filtered through asbestos sheets. Its strength is greatly reduced by the addition of metallic-free water. Color generally comes from the cask as the spirit matures, but some amount of caramel is also added to give the correct tone, that is the color, or also flavors. Difference between Scotch and Irish whiskies, that is in the terms of grain, pot size, distillation, aging, and aroma. So Scotch whiskey, the Scots claims to that three natural influences that makes their malts outstanding, that is water, the purity of air, and the woods used for the oak barrels of the casks. All right. So this is the map of Scotland. Of course, you're not able to see, my bad. Here we have Speyside, Highlands, Lowlands, Islay, and Campbelltown. All right. Malt or single malt whiskey. These are the authentic Is Beverage, also known as the whiskey. They are also known as single malt whiskey, sorry, my bad. Made from only malted barley, and the entire process of distillation carried out in one distillery only. That is for single malt whiskies, of course, from one barley, one distillery. The malt Scotch is distilled by pot still method of distillation. They are all made from malted barley, hence called as malt whiskey. The grains heated on perforated steel plates by peat, the fire. And the smoky flavor imparted by the peat is felt in the final product, that is for single malt whiskey. There are around 100 single malt whiskies produced in Scotland today. The types of Scotch whiskies are here as, in terms of geographical indication, we say Highland, Lowland, Islay, Campbelltown. All right, Highland whiskies have a firm, dry character with some peatiness and saltiness, that is in Highland. All right, Glenmorangie is a good example of a Highland whiskey. There can also be a little bit of nuttiness, spiciness, herbiness, leathery, and smokiness in these whiskies. Major brands within the area are Ben Nevis, Balbeer, Aberfeldy, and Glenmorangie, of course. Single Highland. Lowland whiskies. The whiskies have suggestions of lemongrass and maltiness. Glenkinchie is best known. It is located south of Greenock line. Glasgow and Edinburgh are within this region. The malts are soft, light-bodied, and somewhat gentle in character. Major brands are Little Mill, Rosebag, and St. Macdonald. Campbelltown. The products are distinctly briny, that is sea salt flavored. Example, Glen Scotia. The whiskey distinct in Scotland. These full-bodied whiskies are very distinctive, having a peaty, almost medicinal aroma with spicy, salty, yet mellow flavored overtones. Major brands are Longrow and Springbank. Islay. Famous malts from this region are Lagavulin and Ardbeg. These are strong flavored and strong smelling malts that are distinguished by their intense peaty and smoky characteristics. All right, heavy use of peat and smokiness in this whiskies. The famous examples are Lagavulin and Ardbeg, of course. And we have Lafroy, Bruichlite, Bowmore. Speyside. These whiskies are noted for their elegance, flowery, heathery honey notes, and sometimes a restrained, fragrant peatiness. Macallan and Glenlivet. This Highland subdivision is concentrated around Elgin and Dufftown Town district. So here is Glenlivet and Macallan. Now let's talk about blended Scotch. Blended whiskey is a mixture of both malt and grain whiskies. Grain whiskey is made from mash of several grains, predominantly corn. Grain whiskey is made by patent still method of distillation. Grain whiskies are generally very light, as they tend to run off the still at around 180 proof. All right. These light grain whiskies are then blended with malted whiskies in different proportions. Blended Scotch is divided into two categories, which is bulk and bottled in Scotland. What is bulk? These are shipped in barrels and bottled at the destination. Cheapest quality of whiskey with minimum malt whiskey to grain whiskey ratio. Let's talk about bulk Scotch whiskey examples are Clanmacgregor, Enver House, Old Smuggler, Passport, Usher's Green Strip, and VAT 69, which is quite common in India as well. Bottled in Scotland, we have regular whiskies that are aged for about 10 plus years, premium about 12 to 15 years, and deluxe are 20 plus years. Regular brands are Ballantine's, Bill's, Black and White, Cutty Sark, Dewar's White Label, J&B, which is Just Rainy, and Brooks, Johnny Walker's Red Label, Teacher's Highland Cream, White and Mackay, White Horse, and Haig. All right, let's talk about premium whiskies in blended categories. We have Chivas Regal at the top, along with Johnny Walker's Black Label, and Haig Pink, and Henkel Bannister. Then we have, of course, the deluxe whiskies, which are aged for 20 plus years. So we have Ballantine, Chivas Royal Salute, Bill's Royal Reserve, Johnny Walker's Blue Label, James and Martin Fine and Rare. So let's talk about Irish whiskey. First, the Irish were the first to make the whiskies around the world. From an abundance of grain, they fermented a beer wash, which with the aid of fires, they distilled into a crude spirit called water of life, or you say Is Peat. Ancient traders from the Mediterranean or St. Patrick himself brought the art of distillation to Ireland. Soldiers serving Henry II in the campaign in Ireland were introduced to the spirit in 1171, that is AD, and it became a popular part of the booty to be taken home to England. In 1608, Bushmills opened first distillery. All right. Now, what are Irish whiskies? These are whiskies that are made from malted and unmalted barley mixes in a ratio of 20, 80, or 40, 60. That is a mixture of unmalted barleys and malted barleys. All right. These whiskies have perfumey character, aroma of linseed oil, and flax. These whiskies are produced in Dublin, Bushmill, Tullamore, Cork, that is also known as Meerut. Then we talk about Irish Jameson, the Ireland's bestseller on the world market. And then we have Tullamore, Dew, and Paddy. Middleton, very rare. This is distinctive, brilliant, and very costly whiskey. Was first launched in 1984. It is Ireland's most expensive, but it is worth the price to experience its smooth, silky taste. It is super premium whiskey made in limited batches and vintage bottled. And we have Poteen, produced outside of government control or revenue department, white in color. It is not matured at all. And it is illicit distilled whiskies of Ireland. American whiskies. The Irish and the Scottish brought their distilling skills with them to America. The first whiskies were made in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. In 1971, George Washington, president, decided to levy an excise tax on whiskey. That is history. Then the farmers and distillers moved out, traveling down the Ohio River and into the Kentucky, out of the range of revenue men. Here they found fertile land for growing of grain, and most importantly, the idle water that has been purified, coming through layers and layers of limestone rock. Rye was the first main grain crop used for making whiskies, and there until one year when the rye crop failed partly. Then corn was added to the rye mash, and the resulting distillation had much improved flavor and character. So of course they used rye in the beginning, but some of the crops failed, and then they added corn and rye, a mixture of corn, that is mostly corn, and some percentage of rye to give it a better flavor and character. Production process: grains such as maize or corn, rye, millet, and barley, coarsely grinded around with the heated limestone water, and what is made. Two yeasting processes are widely used in America: the sweet mash process and the sour mash process. Sweet mash process: first the yeast is added. The sour mash process uses the residue from previous distillation. All right. Patent still distilled at about 160 US proof, matured in charred oak barrels. Styles. Straight whiskey is made from one type of grain. It could be rye, it could be corn, barley, whatever, straight whiskeys. All right, blended whiskey must contain at least 20% of straight whiskeys and 80% patent still whiskey distilled at about 190 US proof. Corn whiskey made with 80% of corn. Rye whiskey made mash of containing at least 51% rye, bottled in bond whiskeys. Types. Then we have bourbon whiskeys. A few examples are Ancient Age, Elijah Craig, Maker's Mark, Four Roses, Old Crow, Wild Turkey, which is the best seller in America. Then we have Tennessee, such as Jack Daniels and George Dickel. Moonshine and White Lightning. These are illicit distilled whiskeys of America, produced outside of government control or revenue department, white in color. They are not matured, probably used for local consumption. Next, we have Canadian whiskeys. These whiskeys are made from rye. Canadian whiskeys have some spicy and bitter sweet character obtained from the grain. They are blended with corn whiskey and bourbon whiskey, which impart vanilla note to Canadian whiskey. All right. Brand names such as Canadian Club, Crown Royal. Yeah, these are a few. All right, I have some videos to share here. So here's a little video on Scotch whiskeys.
Scotch whiskey in 60 seconds. Scotch whiskey, or Scotch, is whiskey made in Scotland. All Scotch must be made from water and malted barley. Whole grains of other cereals may also be added. By law, all Scotch whiskey must be distilled and then aged in oak casks in Scotland for at least 3 years and 1 day. Most of the casks are used bourbon barrels made of American white oak. Some distilleries also age the whiskey in old sherry, wine, and even rum casks. Scotch must be bottled at a minimum of 80 proof. There are two major categories of Scotch: single malts and blends. Single malts are made from 100% malted barley and are the product of only one distillery. Single malts generally have flavor characteristics unique to their region. A blended Scotch is a combination of many single malts from different distilleries and aged grain whiskey. Blended whiskeys have the full complexity of their many parts. Here are 5 Scotch whiskeys you've probably seen on the bar. Here's how to drink Scotch.
So this was a small video about Scotch whiskies. I will share another one that is bourbon whiskies.
Bourbon whiskey in 60 seconds. Bourbon is a type of American whiskey, commonly thought to be named for Bourbon County, Kentucky. Others believe the name comes from the 19th century, when Kentucky whiskey was shipped down the Ohio River and sold on New Orleans Bourbon Street, appealing to French Quarter residents because the whiskey tasted somewhat like the cognac they like to drink. Though most brands are produced in Kentucky, bourbon can be made anywhere in the U.S. By law, bourbon must be made from a mash of at least 50% corn. The rest of the mash can consist of barley. Bourbon must be aged in new charred oak barrels. There's no minimum aging requirement, but in order to be called straight bourbon, it must be aged for at least 2 years. Bourbon must be bottled at a minimum of 80 proof. Due to the high percentage of corn, bourbon is typically sweeter compared to other whiskeys. Here are 5 bourbons you've probably seen on the bar. Here's how to drink bourbon.
So here is about Canadian whiskies.
Canadian whiskey in 60 seconds. Canadian whiskey is whiskey made in Canada, aged there in wooden barrels for at least 3 years, and bottled at a minimum of 80 proof. Canadians use a variety of mash bills, that's a combination of grains in different proportions, and then blend them after maturation to create a smooth final product. Canadian whiskey is often referred to as rye whiskey because in its early years, rye was the predominant grain used in the mash. Americans in the Northeast called it rye to distinguish it from American whiskeys like bourbon. Canadian ryes usually have a relatively high rye content, but there's no law there that says rye has to actually be used, unlike American rye whiskey, which must have at least 51% rye in the mash bill. Generally known for its smoothness, Canadian whiskey can have sweet vanilla and caramel toffee notes, and there's often a hint of honey or fruitiness. Different flavors can be attributed to different ingredients in the mash, used to varying degrees. Here are 5 Canadian whiskeys you've probably seen on the bar. Here's how to drink Canadian whiskey.
So a small video also on Japanese whiskey I can share with you guys.
Japanese whiskey in 60 seconds. Japanese whiskey is whiskey made in Japan. Modeled after Scotch, Japanese whiskey is made with malted barley, water, and yeast. While Scotch producers will combine whiskeys from different distilleries to create a distinctive blend, in Japan, each distillery creates its own variations in-house. Each Japanese plant uses a variety of stills, peated or unpeated barley, yeast strains, and woods to produce many different whiskey styles to blend with. This variety of techniques produces complex whiskeys that have made the Japanese style of whiskey an award-winning favorite recently. There are several companies producing whiskey in Japan, but the 2 best known and most widely available are Suntory and Nikka. Both produce single malt and blended whiskeys. Here are 5 Japanese whiskeys you may have seen on the bar. Here's how to drink Japanese whiskey.
Another small video on Scotch whiskey processing, production.
Scots have been making whisky for centuries. Its tradition refines of skilled master craftsmen so that every dram It might surprise you to know that for such a complex and varied drink, Scotch whisky is made using just 3 ingredients. By being steeped in water, then spread out to help it sprout and germinate, producing the sugars that will turn to alcohol later on. The sprouting barley is then dried in a kiln. Sometimes fire in the final whisky. The traditional pagoda-shaped chimney is the distinctive hallmark of a Scottish distillery. Once dry, The barley gets milled and mixed with hot water in a mash pot. The alcohol is the foundation for malt whisky. The real magic begins when the wort is transferred to the large vats known as wash vats. Yeast is then added to kickstart a chemical reaction that converts the wort sugars into a low-strength alcoholic liquid called wash. The wash traditionally gets distilled in two large, distinctive copper stills that act like giant kettles, sending alcohol vapours up the swan neck to condense in pipes cooled by cold water. The liquid runs off from the second size to make sure every drop distilled is accounted for and taxed accordingly. Because the master distiller is unable to smell or taste the alcohol as it runs into the safe, it's at this point his skill really comes into its own. Judging by sight alone, he separates the high-quality middle run of the new spirit from the lower-grade wort and aftershots. Once distilling is complete, the new spirit is poured into casks, and now it's time for the hardest part, the waiting. Whisky is matured in bourbon or sherry oak casks for a minimum of 3 years before it can legally be called Scotch. Many whiskies are matured for months. Warehouses, where over the years the wood of the casks and the surrounding atmosphere gives the whisky its colour, character, and just some of its natural flavours. Using his trained palate, the master distiller will decide when the maturing whisky is ready and fit for finishing and bottling. While the basic distillation process is the same across Scotland, subtle variations in the ingredients and the microclimate, local preferences and technique, and even the shape and size of the stills at different distilleries all contribute to the Lowland whiskies are known for their delicate, malty, citrusy character, while Highland malts tend to be more robust with nutty notes, hints of honey, and if the distillery is near the sea, some salty maritime influences creep in. Speyside is renowned for its fruity single malts, and there's no mistaking Islay whiskies, which are usually heavily peated and have a wonderful, warming, smoky character. Campbelltown whiskies, on the other hand, have a curious mix of characteristics ranging from peat-flavoured to dry or salty. So whether you're a whisky novice or you're already a bit of a connoisseur, this fine spirit has hidden depths just waiting to be explored and discovered. Slange.
That was another video on Jack Daniels, which is the Tennessee whiskey. How is it made? Let's go through.
Distillery in America, Jack Daniels set the bar for Tennessee whiskey. Old number 7, Star Fair gold medal winner. 150 years later, it still has icon status.
You could remove the label from the bottle and people would still be able to look at it and say, that's a Jack Daniels bottle.
This whiskey has long represented free spirits and independence. The stump
there was buried within.
1 billion liters ships to 140 countries every year, and every drop comes out of a dry town with one stoplight.
We think we make the finest whiskey in the world right here in Lynchburg.
It's hard to believe, but Jack Daniels is made in a town where it's illegal to sell it. 80 years after Prohibition, Lynchburg, Tennessee is still dry.
You can't buy it liquor by the drink on the square here. There's not a bar. There's not a whiskey store here in town.
As a distillery, it's important to be close to your water source, and Jack struck liquid gold in the mid-1800s when he moved his distillery to Lynchburg's Capes.
Every drop of Jack Daniels is made from this spring water right here. Every drop.
The initial ingredients are the same as when Jack started. Corn, malted barley, and rye. Mix has a very low percentage of rye.
Where most Kentucky spice is oaky.
trucks a week come through the distillery carting grain for the whiskey.
There's about 1 million pounds of grain a day that's being unloaded and elevated into our silos.
Jack Daniel's is a sour mash whiskey, which means that some of the spent grains from previous batches are used to start fermentation on a new batch.
What that means is basically
Corn and cave spring water and cook.
the mash cookers are basically heating up the grains, cooling them back down, and then setting them into the fermenter.
As the temperature cools, rye is added, and then barley malt, along with Jack Daniel's own strain of yeast.
The yeast that we use today is the one that we've had since Prohibition.
Yeast decays when it's exposed to air or moisture. Jack Daniel's isn't taking any chances with their yeast.
We do keep the cultures, the
yeast in the mash will sit 4 to 6 days.
Okay, this fermenter was set approximately 3 hours ago. You can see how this one is starting to actively bubble.
After several hours, the yeast really gets rolling, not from heat, but from the yeast acting on the water and grains.
It takes each one of those molecules and splits it kind of 50-50 between a CO2 molecule and an ethanol molecule or whiskey.
It's done its work. A liquid with about a 12% alcohol content is transferred to a copper still for distillation.
What you're doing inside a distillation column is just taking advantage of the fact that alcohol will become a vapor.
At the right temperature, alcohol will turn to vapor, but the excess water will remain liquid.
You want to be hot enough that you can vaporize the alcohol, but not so hot that you're also making steam from the water.
The vaporized alcohol is transferred and cooled back into a liquid. This time, the alcohol content is at a full 140 proof.
And then all you're going to do is collect that off into your condenser.
Next, the condensed whiskey is passed through charcoal, made by burning ricks of sugar maple. It has no taste or smell when burned.
What we're using here is 140 proof whiskey. We start in the center.
The whiskey used
Irish whiskey
into the fire is pulled straight from the still.
The reason we use that is because we don't want any kind of petroleum products.
After the wood is burned, it's cooled down and moved into the charcoal room for grinding.
We'll bring it in here and put it in this grinder and grind it up to about a 1/4 inch consistency. The reason we wanted a 1/4 inch consistency is it gives it more surface area.
More surface area ensures the whiskey will run through the charcoal and not around it.
What the charcoal does is filter the fusel oils and corn oils out of the whiskey. When it goes out the bottom of this 10 foot of this charcoal is 140 proof Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey.
The vats are made of white oak. The charcoal is changed out at least every 6 months.
It takes 4 to 5 days before the whiskey, for it to go from the top to the bottom.
What separates this Tennessee whiskey from bourbon is that bourbon doesn't undergo charcoal mellowing.
A bourbon goes from the still to the barrel to the warehouse. Tennessee whiskey goes from the still through the charcoal, the barrel, and then the warehouse.
And too, what makes Jack Daniel's so unique too, we do make our own barrels too,
Like the vats, the barrels are made of American white oak. They're constructed at a cooperage in Louisville, Kentucky. The barrels are formed from cut and planed wood. The wood is steamed so it's pliable, then it's shaped.
Just like bourbon, Jack Daniel's, which is a Tennessee whiskey, must be aged in a new charred white oak barrel.
The whiskey's color and a lot of its flavor comes from the barrels themselves.
The barrel is a key ingredient in the making of whiskey, and it's why Jack Daniel's makes all of its own barrels.
The right char takes about 20 to 25 seconds.
Picture a marshmallow at a campfire being held just above the top of a flame. Slowly it starts to turn brown. Slowly the sugar and flavors and the color changes on the surface of the marshmallow.
The heads of the barrels are assembled and cut to size. And they're charred as well. Heads are added to the barrels. And then hoops are put on.
So we have a head hoop, quarter hoop, and a bilge hoop. So each barrel receives
bung holes are drilled. Once a barrel makes it onto the truck bound for Lynchburg, it'll be filled with whiskey within a week before the wood starts to dry out and shrink.
I'm going to start with this one here. I spot the bung hole up. I took the filler lance in the bung hole and start the whiskey flow.
Each barrel holds about 56 gallons, and it takes about a minute to fill.
Now take a wooden bung, place over the hole. With one hit, you put the bung in the barrel.
The barrels will sit for 4 to 7 years to age before being bottled.
You know, you can taste some of the chard in it from the barrel, some of the vanilla taste from the barrel. So, you know, it's a very unique whiskey.
Jack Daniel's Old No. 7 has been made the same way for 150 years. And for connoisseurs around the world, they wouldn't want it any other way.
All those things Jack Daniels did and dictated that we do, and we still do it today. What we do differently today is we just do all of that a lot better.
All right, guys, thank you very much for today about whiskey. And I'm grateful to Subharti University also and Mr. Vinay Punia for the extreme gesture they took us through. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mohit, for gaining our knowledge about whiskey. Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here apart of your busy schedule. Thank you, Mr. Mohit, and all the attendees for joining us today. Now we will move to the next session of the demonstration of whiskey cocktails. Jai Hind, everyone. Today we will learn about the whiskey cocktails. So the first cocktail we will learn in the whiskey is a classic old-fashioned. As the name suggests of the cocktail will serve in an old-fashioned glass with orange peel, lime peel, some sugar, angostura bitter, and we will use some whiskey for that. So let's start the demonstration of the cocktail. First, we will take the orange peel, and then a lime peel, then add some sugar cube or some sugar, we will add some kombucha bitter on the top. Here is a twist. If you want to give some more flavor to your cocktail, you can add some that sweet kind of maraschino cherry, a spoon or a 1.5 spoon. That will enhance the taste of the cocktail. Then we will muddle it. We will take out the extraction of oil from the orange peel and the lime peel, and we will make sure that we will not press it hard, so the bitter oils comes out. And then we'll add some whiskey to it. Around 45 ml. In the big ice cube. Yeah, sit nicely. We can serve in the same glass or we can transfer it to other ones. What I prefer is the same glass. And then you can serve it to the guest. Cheers. So next cocktail we're going to prepare is Whisky Sour. For the Whisky Sour, we require egg white, we require some whiskey, lemon juice, simple syrup, and for garnish, we require a lemon. Okay, so how to prepare a Whisky Sour? For the Whisky Sour, we serve in an old-fashioned glass. First, we will keep some ice in the glass. The glass will get chilled. Next, we will take some egg white. We're going to use half of it, and rest we will keep it. First, we will keep the egg white in a shaker. We'll put some lime juice, some simple syrup, around like 15 ml each, and then we'll add around 45 ml to 60 ml whiskey. For this cocktail, first we will give a dry shake. So what is dry shake? A shake without ice is called as dry shake. So that we will get the froth of the egg, and after that we will add some ice. When you pour, we always cover so that if any ice get breaks or something, will not get on the guest side. We will give a nice shake for 9 to 10 seconds, or unless we feel it's very cold. If you think the shaker got vacuum, from the plain side, just push it on the other side. Then we'll throw the ice using a popcorn strainer. Nice and frothy. Some more ice to it, and then we'll garnish with a lemon wheel. Or like we can add some cherry as well. Cheers. Next cocktail we will prepare Whisky Sour but with a twist. Let's see. We will prepare this in a roly-poly glass. So we'll keep the glass to chill. Then in a shaker, we will add some pineapple juice. Around like 25 to 30 ml. 45 ml of whiskey. Lemon juice. Simple syrup. 15 ml. First, we'll give a dry shake to it. Then a shake with ice. A nice shake with ice. Okay. We remove the ice. We use the strainer. So the pineapple juice was a secret ingredient just to bring the froth, same as egg. And the garnish is same, a lemon peel. With a cherry. As you can see the level of froth. Cheers. Next cocktail we're going to prepare is Manhattan. As the name suggests, Manhattan is a classic cocktail which is started from United States of America. The ingredient of the cocktail is whiskey, sweet vermouth and Angostura bitter. It is made. We used to prepare this cocktail with a stirred method, served in a martini glass. For the stirring the cocktail, we take some ice. Pour 45 ml of whiskey. Around 15 ml of sweet vermouth. And then Angostura bitter. Some people they like orange bitter as well. And then we'll stir it nicely. Like around 10 to 15 seconds. After like 10 to 15 seconds, we can check the dilution of the cocktail. But sometimes when you stir, if the guest is sitting on the bar counter, you can cover the glass and then stir. And see the dilution is correct. The glass was chilled in the refrigerator. Then we will pour it on the top. And we garnish it with cherries, couple of cherries. Inside. Cheers. Next cocktail we're gonna prepare is Irish Mule. Typically, these mule cocktails like vodka mule or Moscow mule, they used to be prepared in a copper mug, but we will serve here in Nori. First we will take some ice. Then around 30 ml of whiskey, or like to impress your guest, you can pour more. Lemon, we will squeeze it inside and leave it, and at the end we will top up with ginger ale. Stir. And with a couple of straws. Cheers. Next cocktail we're going to prepare is Irish coffee. For Irish coffee, we need Irish whiskey, we need black coffee, we need brown sugar or white sugar as per guest liking. Optionally, you can add some kalwa if you want to give some extra coffee flavor to the alcohol or to the cocktail, but kalwa has the bitterness of the alcohol, so that usually spoils the taste of the Irish coffee. Personally, I don't prefer. Last is whipped cream on the top. So let's start making Irish coffee. First we need a glass. We will put some black coffee. Hot black coffee. Some sugar that we will mix to it. The coffee is hot, so it will take less time for sugar to get dissolved. Next is Irish whiskey. So in this we used to flambe the coffee. I hope now you can see. You can see the flambes in the coffee. So you can see those flames in the Irish whiskey. And now we will pour it over the coffee. Sometimes these kinds of accidents happen, so you can just with a wet survey. Now we can feel the taste, the flavor. At the end, we'll just put whipped cream on the top of it. Some bartenders, they use fresh cream. Perfect. Right, you can garnish with coffee beans. Irish coffee we used to serve with a spoon, and then we serve the Irish coffee with a saucer, napkin and a spoon. This cocktail is served hot. Thank you. Go. So next cocktail we're gonna prepare, the name is Three Wise Men Rocking. So who are those three wise men? Let me introduce. First we have from Ireland, Mr. Jameson, the Jameson whiskey. He's from Scotland, Mr. Johnny Walker, Black Label. Third one is from America, Mr. Jack Daniels. So these are the three brands that we serve together in a 120 glass. So this is a build-up in a rock glass. So in this cocktail, this is not a classic cocktail, but yet very famous. So this is a mix of whiskey culture from Scotland, from Ireland and from America. This drink does not have any garnish, but if you like to serve it with a garnish, a cherry is good. Thank you so much. The guest can stir it and drink it sip by sip. The next cocktail we're going to prepare is brown derby. We used to serve brown derby in an old fashioned glass, and we keep the glass shell. And in a shaker, add some ice. To prepare brown derby, we required some lime juice, some honey, whiskey, and a grapefruit juice. Grapefruit is comes under the category of citrus fruit, and which is way more citrus than the orange. So we will add 30 ml to 45 ml whiskey. We'll add some around 45 ml of grapefruit juice. We'll add some 15 ml lemon juice, and we'll add some honey. Like around 1.5 spoon of honey. As we have seen, we have added honey. So honey has a different consistency than the rest of the liquid that we use. We use whiskey, we use grapefruit juice and a lemon juice. Honey is way more thicker than these three. So a regular shake is for 10 seconds, but to mix honey in this cocktail, you will shake it for around 20 to 25 seconds. Around 3 cubes of ice on medium, a double spray. And we can garnish it with a peel of orange or grapefruit. Just to put, and we'll keep on the side as well. And with double straws. Thank you. Next cocktail we're gonna prepare is whiskey cobbler. Whiskey cobbler is a type of cocktail in which fruits is added. So we'll take a decanter, or we can take a glass container in which we will add the fruits and we will allow it to soak. So we'll add some apple, some pear mixed with green apple, orange. We are not allowed to touch the fruits with the hand. We will use gloves or we'll use like any other thing to support. And after this we will add the whiskey and we'll allow whiskey to be soaked inside. Overnight or around like 24 hours. If you want to make it instantly and you want to add some extra flavor, you can add some dark rum or we can add some cognac to it. That is how we would make it. And after this, we'll give a nice stir to it. And we'll keep it overnight. Thank you. Next cocktail we're gonna prepare is mint julep. So in mint julep we need some sugar, mint leaves, whiskey, especially bourbon, and then we need some club soda or water to top up. So we'll start with mint leaves. And then We muddle them. And then we add some shaved ice or crushed ice. We'll add some 45 ml of bourbon. We'll top up with some club soda. And then we'll garnish with some mint leaves. Thank you. And of course, a couple of straws. Thank you. So next cocktail we're gonna prepare is Belvedere. So Belvedere has ingredient Campari and whiskey. So, and the method used is stir. So we add some ice in a stirring glass. We'll put around 35 ml of Campari. And then we add around 45 ml whiskey to it. Give it a nice stir. And we will serve the cocktail in a rolly-poly glass. Three to 4 cubes of ice. As Campari has the base of orange, so we will put the cocktail garnish as orange peel. Inside with the stir. Thank you. And next cocktail we're gonna prepare is Vivekanand. Serve in a daiquiri glass. The ingredients are cognac, whiskey, and vermouth. It's prepared by shaker method. In a shaker, we will pour 45 ml of whiskey 30 ml of cognac, and around 15 ml of vermouth, and then shake. Then we double strain that drink. And the garnish is cherry. We'll put double cherry to it. Cheers. So next cocktail we're going to prepare over here is a toddy, a typical whiskey toddy. If you're like a winter's night, so if you want some of the warmness with the drink, so this is the best option. For the toddy, first we need lukewarm water. With some honey, we'll mix the honey in the hot water. The water is around like 60 ml to 90 ml. Now honey is now mixed with the water. I will transfer this to brandy glue. Sometimes we should garnish with some orange and cloves or with some lemon and cloves. And then we will use the flammable whiskey, or we will warm the whiskey. You see the flames inside the whiskey. As soon as you start feeling the whiskey is warm, you can pour it inside. Yeah, you can serve or you can drink your whiskey toddy. Then how to serve a toddy? If you want to serve a toddy to a guest on the table, then how to serve? And take a tea light candle, a small candle, light the candle, and you can keep it inside the glass. If you want to warm the toddy, you can serve like this to a guest. So it will remain warm for like another 5 to 10 minutes. This is the method one. And the second one, you can put a hot water in a glass, and then with the vapors, the toddy will remain hot for a long time. The same way is the style of serving of cognac as well. both ways, like this, and the other way. Thank you. Next cocktail we're gonna prepare is a Lynchburg Lemonade. Lynchburg Lemonade. So Lynchburg is a label which comes with Jack Daniels. So it is more like a Jack Daniels lemonade with a twist of orange. So for this, you take a shaker. Pour 40 ml, 45 ml of Jack Daniels, some triple sec, around 15 ml, little bit sugar syrup or simple syrup, some 15 ml of lemon juice, and orange juice. And shake it nicely. We'll top up with club soda, and we'll garnish with orange and cherry. With double straws and still. Thank you. So next cocktail we're gonna prepare is Sazerac. Sazerac is very famous cocktail. Like in many movies also, where the actors they have shown interest in Sazerac and they have ordered like Sazerac in the bars. So for making Sazerac, first we need a rock glass with ice, in this glass we're gonna serve Sazerac, and then we're gonna put some absinthe for a taste, or just to get the aroma of the absinthe. Absinthe comes in different types, like strong absinthe, extra strong, and medium absinthe. Strong, extra strong absinthe have like 90% of alcoholic strength. Medium has around like 80 to 85. Then a lighter one has like around 70 to 75% of alcohol. So in absinthe, we don't use absinthe usually for the drink, but to get only the aroma. So we'll just swirl the ice. But in the other glass, we will add 30 ml of whiskey and 30 ml of cognac. And now we're going to stir them nicely. After this, when you get the aroma of the absinthe, throw the ice, and we will not, after throwing the ice, we will not like just pushing the everything just goes out. We will, the absinthe will remain inside, the aroma of the absinthe. And then we will just spread the glass to the serving glass. Then we will garnish with a lime peel or orange peel. It is how we serve Sazerac. Thank you. Next cocktail we will prepare is John Collins. John Collins is same like Tom Collins but with whiskey. We'll take a hydro flask with ice. Then a shaker with ice. We will put around 45 ml whiskey. ml of simple syrup, 15 ml of lemon juice, now shake them nicely. Then pour that in a tall glass. And then we will top it with club soda. Garnish with, or just press the lime and leave it inside. With double straws and stir. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Hope it was extremely informative. We will see you soon. We will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Be safe. Thank you. Jai Hind.